Hello and welcome. I'm so pleased to welcome our friend and also all of you to connect with Miles Levin today, longtime friend of the Epilepsy Foundation of Michigan and also our whole epilepsy network and community as a whole. Um, just to briefly introduce Miles, although I'm going to let Miles introduce himself, Miles is a filmmaker, a director, a writer. Um, Someone who's building advocacy and epilepsy uh, information and story is what's so important, right? And building that awareness. So Miles, would you introduce yourself a little bit, and then we're going to talk about your film, both the short film and the upcoming film, and just some of the themes that are a part of that.
Yeah, so I'm Miles and I'm a filmmaker with epilepsy. And my project is Under the Lights, which is about a boy with epilepsy who's so desperate to feel like a regular kid, he goes to prom knowing the lights will make him have a seizure. And so that is a short film that's available on YouTube. And then we went and made the full length, Hollywood movie, if you want to put it in simple terms. And I did this because for years and years, as an advocate, I was getting up on stages, talking about how important epilepsy awareness is. And then I realized that the only people interested in hearing about that are people who already know. So anytime we have a gala or we have someone speak at a walk or something like that, we call it awareness. And it's not really. It's solidarity, maybe. It's maybe great for fundraising, but the amount of awareness that's actually happening is pretty limited, right? Like someone has to walk by and see the purple shirt and then go, "Oh, I want to learn more about that," and then get involved. And that's series of steps that reaches less people than we hope for. Again, great for solidarity, great for fundraising, not particularly amazing for awareness. So how do we accomplish awareness? Well, people will happily show up to learn something new if it's a movie or a TV show, right? We do that all the time. We pick up stories about things that we don't know about and not necessarily documentaries, right? We see stories about serial killers and all kinds of stuff, Sasquatch, whatever. And what a good story does is it connects you with something that is not you, but it makes you care about it, or you find that mutual connection within yourself. And so I realized that one movie done really well could reach more people than our typical efforts do, in a decade. And that's not a flex. The idea is that we then arm all of these foundations with a new tool that they can use to get people in the room to share their message, right? To get those trainings done, to get that information out there. So it's been a really cool partnership with foundations and associations everywhere.
That is really beautiful. And it's two things I really want to emphasize from what you said. First of all, you were like, we made the long film. And I just heard that in past tense, and it made my heart soar because I remember that period between the short film and getting to that place of being able to make the longer film, which will be released in, a bigger way soon. Um, just, move that was a story in and of itself, moving towards something. And it's so exciting to hear that. And of course, the other thing I really want to lift up that I think you always speak about so well is that, awareness, information is important, but it's that story, because the story is what invites people into even the desire to learn, right? We want people to have that accurate information, but sometimes it is that story that is the entry point, and also moving the heart, right? Like that's just as important as the facts that we know. And I really
Right.
appreciate that. Yeah, so good. Well, you had said this just a moment ago too. Like the main character, Sam, in this film, Under the Lights, wants so badly to just feel like any typical teenager, a so quote unquote normal kid. And that longing is really universal for teens, for humans, for all of us. And what does the film say about embracing who we are, even when it's hard?
Yeah, I think that there's a couple components to that. One is that there is a magic to seeing someone like you on screen. And when the only time you've been represented on screen is in a horror movie or a hospital show, I believe that most of the stigma we face comes from that. And I also believe that most of the trauma that people with epilepsy experience, it's not really just about seizures. It's all of the social components, which is something that we can fix probably a lot faster than we'll get to, a cure for all 40 whatever kinds of seizures, right? And so I wanted to present someone like us on screen, but I wanted to do it in a context where the average person would also see themselves, whether they have epilepsy or not. And a really good way to do that is through, I think, a coming of age experience like prom. And I felt as though if you try to represent all people with epilepsy on screen at the same time in one movie, you'll represent none of them because it's such a diverse experience. But the one thing that does unite us is the feeling of feeling left out. And that's something that average people can relate to. Very, very, very few people have never felt that. And I, as a person with epilepsy, remember the feeling, that dark fantasy of saying, there's this thing I can't do and that I shouldn't do, but what if I did? What would it mean to me? What
Yeah.
if I did? What if I went anyway? And, without endorsing that, I think that that's also something that the average person can connect to and that there's a lot of value there.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So there are lots of connection points here, and I think you're right that when you represent the particular, sometimes that does allow for the universal to kind of show up, right? We are all particular. We have kind of these stories in our journey and those places to relate. I think that's really, really beautiful. Awesome. Another question, what was it like to create this? I mean, you are a person with epilepsy, and we are people with epilepsy coming around this film. What did it feel like personally, as a storyteller in your own life? And are there some moments that stood out for you in the filming of like, "Oof, I'm going to remember this forever"?
Yeah, the short film was incredibly emotional to make because it was the first time that I had really sort of looked myself in the eye, if that makes sense.
Sure.
And I had to really put it all out there. I had to work with an actor and get him to basically be my exact reflection as far as symptoms go and make an authentic performance, which was really a cathartic experience. And then the feature was just so hard to make because it took so many years. And now, we're on the precipice of being totally, totally done with it. And it really transformed my experience with epilepsy into something useful, right? Because when you take your story and you tell it, and if you do ever have the privilege of seeing the effect that it has on someone else, what it does is it provides value to your experience. And my narrative around my experience has always been that I feel like I missed out a lot. I feel like I was simultaneously never a child or an adult at any given
Mm,
moment. And I say was for a reason because now that I've done this and I've seen the tremendous value that it's had, these projects have changed lives in very substantial ways. And I will never even know all of the people or meet all of the people, but I know that that's taken place. And so now I feel like this experience is absolutely not a waste, right? Because I went through this, because I had these challenges, I actually ended up with something to provide and to give back that I'm uniquely capable of doing that if I didn't have epilepsy, I wouldn't be able to do that. So the word is purpose. It gave me
yeah.
tremendous purpose.
That is really powerful. And that's another example of like, here's a particular experience of that is also universal in the sense that we all have those unique gifts and storylines in our own lived experience, right? That can create space, like transformative space for people to see themselves and to join that purpose, right? That's absolutely huge. I love that. I know the story a lot, in Under the Lights is about visibility in some ways and the ability to do something. Like on one hand, oh, so many people relate to this, teens, adults, everybody, struggling with, the possibility of having a seizure visibly in public, and with the willingness maybe to risk that to do certain things like go to prom. But of course, on the other hand, there is this very human need to be seen and understood, connected with, cared for, respected, dignity, all the names we could put to that. What do those themes mean to you, and how do they show up in Under the Lights?
Well, I just remember going to camp, working at epilepsy camp. My local one is called Camp Coelho, named after the father of the ADA and Senator Tony Coelho. That's an aside. Point being, what I noticed when these kids would talk about their epilepsy, as I previously stated, they would talk about how their seizures were hard or annoying or, you know, challenging, but the rest of the 80% of what they had to say about epilepsy was about the social implications. You'd have teenagers who had never made friends before. You have all these kids that they've never felt quote unquote normal ever. They felt like being able to participate in activities with other kids or even just being around someone like them was out of reach. And these are all things that are necessary to feel like you have a life that you like. And when you feel like you have a life that is beyond your diagnosis, the quality of your life improves, and you no longer require necessarily the diagnosis alone to improve, right? You can improve the conditions without finally finding the magic medicine. And then the combination of your treatment and the quality of your life socially combined has you know, is the answer. And so dignity, communication, feeling seen, feeling like you're a part of a tribe, all of these things are necessary for any human being to feel good about their lives. And especially when we live with challenges, we have to find a good reason to get out of bed in the morning. And for me, that was service. And that is, I think, a universal rule that if you find someone to serve or something to serve, you feel like getting out of bed in the morning, even when it's hard. And that's necessary to push on, especially when your life is extra challenging. And as a quick aside, I also find that people with this diagnosis oftentimes don't really want to participate in something epilepsy related, either tell the story or be in a support group or things like that, or work at camp, whatever it might be, because it means you're spending more time, not less time around your epilepsy. But it's also, I think, a shortcut to purpose because you're able to provide something that only you can
Mhm.
do and serve that community. And it really is medicine to do so.
It is, and I think that's why being involved in all of this large community we're a part of, and this movement toward awareness and toward belonging, really, and social change, it's just one of the most exciting times ever to be a part of this, because we're seeing, not that it's new, but such a renewed interest in language around connection and belonging. I mean, I remember recently at a conference we were both at, seeing at the National Epilepsy Foundation Leadership Conference, this language of like, treat epilepsy with community, and it's not like we're going to stop taking those medicines, but like that is part of it. Like you said, it's this social medicine. It heals the heart of any kind of isolation or stigma or anything like that. It's huge.
Also just human. It's in your
Yeah.
caveman brain to
Yes.
require those things. The statistic that I read is that and this gets a little dark, but the suicide rate is something like 3 to 5 times the national average in the USA for people living with epilepsy. And medications, have being on medications can affect mood and things like that, but epilepsy is isolating. And as humans, we need to feel connected. We need to feel like we're a part of something. We need to feel like we have a tribe in order to keep going. And so I think that that's something we need to talk about more.
And back to that particular and universal, it's like, okay, if this is our way of doing that within our community and even beyond, people who may have this diagnosis, like we start to build bridges in other ways. Who else in this world is being left out? Who else in this world is feeling that isolation? And if we can have that experience internally, it changes all kinds of things, right? I mean, we are people with epilepsy and we have all of these circles we belong to or circles we are close to, or even maybe that we don't understand, but because we know what it's like to have people not understand us, we sort of can stretch ourselves, and it's just building empathy across the board, and it's really lovely. So I have to ask this question: what is next for Under the Lights? Because the film's been made, so what's happening now, and what might be to come?
Well, the first thing that people should do is they should go check out Under the Lights on socials. So that's at Under the Lights Film on Facebook and Instagram. And you can see all of the fan art and the, updates and things like that there. But the best way to get updates on the film is underthelightsfilm.com and putting in your email there. That way, when the film is truly out, then, you're going to know where and how and all of that information. That's how I'm going to reach you. So film's done. First stop is film festivals, so we'll have announcements on that soon, and then from there, the distribution strategy will sort of unfold. But the goal is to make it very, very easy for you to see the film, and yeah, and then from there, I mean, it will be a part of. It's never over, right? I mean, the short was shot in 2018, and I'm still screening it and talking about it, state by state. It's always on tour, is what I'm getting to. So it will always, always, always be a big part of my life. I sort of accidentally became, Mr. Epilepsy, So like we're having this conversation right now about a film that was shot in 2018, which is crazy. So the feature will certainly be, you know, in my life forever, and this is my work.
Amazing. And it'll be in our lives forever too, right? That's part of the point, is that this can continue to move on and invite people in to this lived experience and story. So it's amazing. But speaking of like filming things, another thing you did somewhat recently was giving a TED Talk. Thank you,
Yeah.
Mr. Epilepsy, as you said. Um, and in that TED Talk, you really kind of tried to distinguish between chasing those external dreams and then finding that internal purpose, which you've mentioned a little bit already today. What has that looked like for you? Any ideas about how that might help teens as they think about their own kind of vision and goals, those kinds of things?
Yeah, so in my own silly sense of humor, the TED Talk is called Why You Should Give Up on Your Dreams. Because I just really wanted to see a TED Talk exist that had some, message like that. And what I said in it is that, throughout my life wanting to be a filmmaker, it's really easy to want to chase these sort of idealized achievements, you know, the the awards, the red carpet experiences and all of these things that really are somebody else's decision. And I found that a universal truth in humanity is that first off, happiness is not an end goal, and we treat it like it's this place that we get to. I want to be happy. My goal in life is to be happy. Well, I have news for you. It's a moment. Happiness is a moment. It's not something you can ever hope to maintain indefinitely. It's a feature of life, but it can't be the goal. However, a goal that you can have is to live a meaningful and purposeful life by being a part of something, putting your efforts towards something that's more important than you. And when you do that, and for me, that was through storytelling, not only do you feel better about your life and are you happy more often, but the quality of your life improves. And that was something that was really important to me as someone living with epilepsy, to learn that being famous and being, an award winner was not going to absolve me of living a life that has challenges. And for some reason, I think that we're sort of taught that that's the goal. The goal is to be successful, which isn't this concrete thing. It's like you're recognized, you have make money, whatever that is. And I think we've lost sight of the only thing that really should matter in life, which is to live a meaningful existence.
Purposeful life. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's gorgeous, and it's a beautiful invitation. We know because we hear it from teens. I think we probably remember being a teen also, and just that pressure of feeling like you have to have everything figured out, whether that's career, college, impact. Um, I mean, I know my life already has moved through all kinds of different careers and placements and different things. And, what would you say to a young person that's like feeling that pressure right now or just doesn't even know what's possible for them?
Yeah, so it's all BS, and really,
It,
it's all
it is.
it's complete BS. You're being, and I apologize if you have parents that and a school. I went to like a fancy. I had a scholarship to a fancy school where everyone it's promised if you go to the school you're going to go to college. Um, I don't have a degree. I don't. Well, I have a high school degree, but I don't have a college degree, and I found what I'm supposed to do in this life in an iterative fashion. Very few people find one path and that's their forever existence. I hope that what I'm doing today is not all that I will ever be. Life is full of endless possibilities. And how boring would it be to just be one thing for the rest of your life? That was fine in your grandpa's day and age. There was a time where you did exactly the thing that your great grandfather did, exactly the same way as he did it in the same town, right?
Right.
That's how things used to be. You learn to use a hammer, and your great grandkids use the very same hammer. Things are moving so fast now that the tools you use aren't even going to be the same ones that you use next year. And so it's totally unfair to yourself to expect that not only should you find out who you are now, but that should be who you are forever. If you want to feel good, you need to allow yourself that grace to say, maybe I'm going to pick a path and it's something that I'm curious about, I want to explore, but I'm going to give myself the grace to say I'm going to be a lot of things in life. I heard somewhere that the average person is going to have 7 careers now, not just one. And that shouldn't be a sad thing. That should be a really cool, really exciting thing. I think, especially people in the arts have this really dated idea of like, oh, well, if I'm also a bartender, that means I'm a failed actor or whatever. Like,
Right.
that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. You're going to be such a worse artist if you haven't experienced life, you know? You're going to be a terrible artist if all you know is art. And and so I encourage young people to try their best, work hard. It's not an excuse to not do your classes well. It's not an excuse to not study for your tests. Um, get on a path, give it your best shot, and maybe it takes you all the way to the end. And if it doesn't, it means that your life is normal.
Yeah,
And
that's
that's
exactly. Yeah, all that wanting to be normal, this is it.
a good
That's
thing.
absolutely true. And I will also say, as someone who's had some of those experiences, like the things I started doing that didn't take me to the end show up in my work all the time. Like nothing is lost either, right? If
No.
you take a path and you're like, "Ooh, this wasn't for me, I don't like it," or something else comes along, that time is not lost on you. I mean, the experiences, the people you've met, the skills it built in you, right? And I think that's a beautiful thing. Love it. Okay, what is something you've learned, Miles, maybe even unexpectedly, by letting go of a dream and what opened up in its place?
Yeah, I mean my speech is a little sarcastic, right? It's not as though I totally lost the dream, it's that the dream expanded to include things that I didn't fully value before, right? Honestly, I did go on to win awards for my shorts and stuff like that, and they sit in a box. With no offense to the film festivals, but they sit in a box because staring at them doesn't bring me it doesn't make me go like, wow, I have a cool life, you know? And honestly, like an Oscar shouldn't make you feel that way. Like I've always had this sense that if I ever win an Oscar, I think the very best thing I could do is keep it out of sight and, you know, to not put it on the shelf, you know? And because it's a misplaced idea to require these things in your life that are not your decision. Oscars don't go necessarily to the best film. Uh, it goes to something that a group of people voted for on their own opinion. You know, in sports, if you're in a running race, you run as fast as you can, and the gold medal always goes to the person who crosses the finish line the first, always to the fastest person, with no exception, unless there's a tie. In art, everybody runs around the race, everyone races, and then a group of judges sits down and gives their opinion over who they think ran the fastest because no one timed it and there was no line on the ground, right? And so it's seizure. There you go. There's proof. So and so it doesn't make sense for me to or anyone to set your goals on end goals. If you set your goals on end goals, two things happen. One, you judge yourself by how far away the mountaintop is. And two, if you reach the mountaintop, you go, what now? And to get a little extra philosophical, I read this thing in a book recently that I thought was really profound, which is it says there's three tragedies in life. The first is not getting what you want. The second is getting something that you didn't want. And the third is getting what you want. And what that means to me, and we're rambling a little bit, I know, but and I
Good
talk a
rambling,
lot.
my friend. So please.
I get a little tangential, but what that means to me is this. Inevitably in life, your direction shifts. And for people with epilepsy, that's the thing we didn't want, right? So we've accomplished the first two. One's just how it is. Second is you got this challenge. And what if you do live the dream? How beautiful, how great that you get to put that down on paper. But then you have to completely reevaluate the rest of your life and start from scratch if you finally cross that finish line. So it's really important to set goals that are indefinite. I want to be someone who serves something bigger than myself. I want to be a part of, I want to be involved in a group of people who are doing something that matters. And uh, more so than any award or any recognition, I want to make sure that the work that I do has a lasting and a lasting impact and helps people to live better lives. Those are all long-term things that require that I get out of bed in the morning and I participate. And whereas an award happens when an email comes in my inbox because someone else formed an opinion at some point in the last week, right?
Yeah. I really appreciate that. And I know people watching appreciate that too. And I think that those questions you're asking, like you said, those are the kinds of questions we live into for the rest of our lives because guess what? The film has been made. It's going to do things, it's going to continue to live on. But I think Miles, I guess I want to affirm you in this. Like part of the legacy of what you've created here is not only the film, but those questions. And I think for you and for everyone who receives them and makes those questions their own, it's creating all kinds of space for all sorts of possibilities, whether that's that internal belonging or things that will be made, stories that will be told, voices that will be uplifted. And so, on that note, I just absolutely thank you for your own voice and making this story and letting your story, your own story, intertwine with it as well as everyone else.
Thank
So
you
I
for
appreciate
what,
this very much.
yes, thank you very much. It's always something I love doing is this sort of thing. So
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Now I stop.